Vladika died July 2nd of 1966 in Seattle. He had left a few days earlier by car with Vladika Niktari, and I was supposed to go with him, but at the last minute I changed my mind because I decided I wanted to visit my brother, and to this day I regret that decision. On the way to Seattle, Vladika served liturgy in the homes where he stayed overnight, and he arrived in Seattle. He served liturgy that Saturday morning, and Отец Andrei Nakoniechny went with the icon to visit some of the Kursk icon to visit some of the parishioners, and Vladika had lunch with the widow of the former priest there, and was going to go to the cemetery. And two of the parishioners whom he had known earlier were waiting for him downstairs. He went upstairs to get his things, and they heard a fall. And something falling, something heavy falling. When they ran up, they saw Vladika trying to get up. Vladika had fallen, and he said that nothing of a kind has ever happened to him. They sat him down in his chair, and he was sitting there silently, and then he started grasping for air and passed away. That day, my brother and I flew from San Francisco to Seattle with Vladika's Easter vestments. Vladika Niktari and I, we prepared Vladika, just the two of us, the way for a monastic burial, and we vested him, the two of us, we vested him in the pontifical vestments, and then when everything was ready, we laid him in the coffin. And in the early afternoon, we flew from Seattle to San Francisco with Vladika's remains. The burial took place on Thursday. Vladika laid in state at the cathedral all those days. San Francisco does not get hot during the summer months, but the cathedral was full every day, so it was warm, and Vladika's remains did not show any signs of decay. Before leaving for Seattle, Vladika, in my presence, called the Russian newspaper in San Francisco, Russkaya Жизнь, and ordered an announcement in the paper that on June 24th, July 7th, is the feast of St. John the Baptist, the Nativity of St. John, and there would be a very festive service at the cathedral. That announcement was never printed because Vladika died, and all the announcements were about, the schedule of the services and his funeral. But I remember calling the office of the newspaper and saying that there will be a festive service on the Nativity of St. John.
I was one of those who was blessed to be a witness of the opening of the relics of our Holy Father among the Saints, John of Shanghai and San Francisco, in October of 1993.
When the sarcophagus was open for examination before the glorification of St. John, it took place in two parts. The first part was to examine that there were holy relics for veneration, and they were put into a new wooden casket. And the second time they were open, and then the holy relics were revested into the vestments that they're in now.
Before the archpastors arrived, the priests began to read the gospel over the relics of the saint. And when they did arrive, we served a full panihida, after which His Grace Archbishop Anthony blessed, at that time, Father Peter Lukianov, who is now, of course, His Grace Bishop Peter of Cleveland, to open the casket.
The original metal coffin had rusted through in some parts. We couldn't open the lid. We had to pry it open.
It was Father George Kurtov and myself who had actually discovered a way to kind of snap one of the hinges, which had also rusted through, and actually begin to open up the lid of the casket, at which point we notified the Archbishop of this, and he stopped everyone from what they were doing and had us all stand piously and wait that moment, and with his blessings we opened up the casket and discovered the incorrupt relics of the saint.
And the very moment of opening of the and examining of the remains is probably the most phenomenal moment of my life, really, to see that for the first time.
Well, Dick, you could see that the body was dehydrated, and it was covered with I really don't know what, but a layer of some white, it was almost like dust. That was at the second opening that all this, the relics were washed, but otherwise they were intact, completely intact.
When we began to sort of work, if you will, on the relics, to clean off some of the rust and some of the material, we peeled it off from the relics. Archbishop Anthony then removed the air that was covering the face of the saint, and there he was, incorrupt and very recognizable. His hair, his beard, his fingernails, the blood vessels on his fingers were visible and noticeable. And as we began to sweep off rust and so forth from the various parts of the body, nothing